Play, Watch, Listen is a mostly games industry podcast featuring mostly game developers, and it is funded entirely by supporters on Patreon.
I like Close Up Austin.
I'm just not... Yeah, what? Did you change it? It's not that you... The difference is not...
It's not the lead.
It's not that you're not leaned back, it's that the camera's really close to your face. I'm used to it being... Okay, this is how I perceive you, Austin, as on Play, Watch, Listen. I just need a second microphone here. This is how I think you contribute to the podcast.
With
Maybe
my
sometimes
chin
sort of
stabbing
like
my sternum.
Yeah, it's... I just need
To
a red
recline.
Well, look, I'm trying to
How's that
clean up
lower
my
back
act.
doing, brother?
That I for sure need to perpetually improve.
You have dumbbells
So-
behind you?
Yes, I was recording them.
It's a bit of a flex.
You were recording them?
Yeah, I was hitting them with those mallets.
That's cool.
I
Do
do.
you get a demo?
I
Can you hear
do
what that
also-
hears like?
Yeah, what's the sound like?
Hear what
Doesn't
that hears
sound
like?
like
Can we hear
much
how that
because
sounds?
You have
Yeah.
to have the microphone about an inch away to hear anything.
All I'm hearing is excuses.
It doesn't sound like anything.
No.
It sounds like I'm just tapping a table, but there's a slight metal. It's like a very dull metal kind of bunk to it, and when the mic
Did
is
you
right
run out
there,
of instruments? You've
I've
now
used them all.
every instrument.
I've used them all, so I'm like, what the fuck else is
100%
around
completion
here?
rate. Got to find new ones.
I love that.
Someone's got to do it.
Yeah,
Elite skills.
it was no. I was combining it because I was recording this, the hand drum, and it's obviously a very big metallic sound, and if you combine it with the sort of toneless quality of hitting the weight, it makes for a cool little composite sound.
What's it sound like if you hit that router in the box at the back, though?
That's an external hard drive, which will soon contain the contents of said recordings.
You have a made-up job.
I feel like
Anyone
me
told
and
you that
Alana
before?
are leaning hard. Why are we roasting everything in Austin's camera?
No
Why are we
one-
open that way?
No one on this show has ever been allowed to show up with dumbbells in the background and think it wouldn't be mentioned. What in the audacity?
It's fair.
You were never
It's
not
fair.
going to have the dumbbells that you got sitting on that table just washed over.
For the record, I
couldn't
do
leave it.
actually lift with them as well, and not leaning over to pick them up off the floor has made me use them way more. I actually walk by and I'm like, I should lift now. And if I had to bend over, I wouldn't do it. So I'm like, this table was meant to be temporary because I was setting up my computer differently and I just hadn't slid it out of sight yet. And
That makes
then
you
it was
lift
like,
weights while at work. That's
yeah.
great.
that's the funny thing. Is sort of unintentionally social engineered myself. And
You manipulated yourself, yeah.
yeah.
You've gamified the workplace into nice.
No, 100%.
Have to happen
100%.
eventually. We haven't done an episode in like a month because everybody's been very busy, which I think is like, it's about time that we accept
These dumbbells aren't going to record themselves.
that these dumbbells aren't going to record.
We
Somebody's
all
got
have
to do
real
it.
jobs. That's the important thing that we all remember in this is we all have real jobs. That's the crucial.
Except Austin.
Except Austin.
That's a made-up job.
Yeah.
Um,
It is a made-up job.
it's time to maybe accept that we are back to being a monthly podcast as much as we have desperately clung to pretending that we aren't that. We held off for as long
Unless,
as we could.
hey, fingers crossed for another pandemic, which, would make it nice and easily weekly again. So
that is how it
you take your
started,
pick.
and we really tried to
That's not
pretend
the
it was
position
lost.
of the entire podcast, I
No,
want to be
just
clear.
one,
That's
just
not
one.
the state's position of the whole
I'm
show.
just saying, take your pick.
Yeah.
We can do it weekly, or we can not have a pandemic.
Have jobs, yeah. Huge bummer, but it does mean that we get to go back to like sort of an elaborate book club, which is you guys played anything cool or seen anything cool or done anything cool in the past month?
No.
Anything good about life?
Austin, you now look like a dismembered head. In a good way, I liked it.
Dismembered.
Because we couldn't see your shirt.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that there is a good way to be a dismembered head. That's
Yeah.
You were alive.
that is true.
It's the good kind.
True.
Still
it's like
living.
bring me the head of the navigator from Monkey Island.
Exactly.
I have been, I must say, staggeringly behind in my game consumption the last few months. I've been trying to. My highest priority game is the Hellblade sequel because I want to. I'm teeing up a podcast with David Garcia, the composer, for the dice show, and I keep having to punt because I'm like, I'm so sorry, I still haven't had a chance to sort of play the game properly, and I really want to because I fucking loved the first one.
That's right.
I just
And
replayed the first one with the intention of playing the second one. I haven't yet though.
Yeah, exactly. So I did buy a bunch of games today as a way to like force myself to kind of get back into the groove. Where I was like, even if I'm just 20 minutes to sample and get a sense of what they're about, because that's often what I do. I'll get a whole bunch and I'll kind of like taste test and then go, ooh, that one, I want to come back to that one. Like Frostpunk was one of those for me a few years ago where I played like 20 minutes of it and then it was like, that one's going back, and now I've played like 30 hours of it,
Great game.
because it was just one of those that, I was sampling a bunch and I made note, don't delete this one from Steam. Keep it in there as a guilt trip. And and the sequel's coming out soon, and that also has me very excited.
What did you?
But yeah,
get
I've been
this week,
awful.
then? What did you? You said you bought some games. What did you get?
I just bought. I was looking. It was like, what did I get? I pre-purchased Frostpunk.
Nice.
There's an indie game called Animal Well that I don't know anything about, but I heard like it's like I saw a tweet
People
or
love
something.
Is that the donkey game?
Yeah.
I don't know anything.
Not sure.
Bought it sight unseen.
I know it's one that you're meant to know nothing about. It's on my list. I just haven't got to it yet, but I've heard very good things.
I think it is. So it is the donkey game, which we have spoken about on the podcast before. I don't actually know if you're on that episode, Austin.
As in the YouTuber who set up their own publisher.
Yes, who basically, and I love that we defended him because the first game that he released, Animal Well, is a fucking banger. So basically...
Was that our position? Because I remember it was a big controversy. We were on the side of let the dude cook.
Our position was, so basically Donkey is a video game YouTuber, does some sort of reviews. He's quite critical. He announced that he was going to be starting a publisher, and his video was because I know good video games, which is very cheesy thing to say. It was easy not to buy into that. Some YouTuber who knows good video games, don't we all? But we did have the stance on the show. I think this is what our stance was because it's what I always felt. What's the harm in trying? May as well let somebody who's making a bunch of money. He's making a bunch of money making content off of video games. That's what built his platform. What is the
argument against that?
People would just... I mean,
how very dare he?
The games industry's pretty snooty, about some things.
I bet I was a bit snooty. I don't think I was
snooty.
Probably perfect.
I
think I was a bit snide, probably.
Yeah, you probably said...
I can't help it.
Some negative things.
In the accent.
Anything
I
you
probably
say sounds
colonized the
a
conversation a little bit.
But
I'm actually astounded at my own ignorance that I was not familiar with video game Donkey, and this is a gigantic channel. I had no idea. I'm really, it's funny how this was apparently a huge blind spot.
We're all in our little algorithm.
Well, I'm only familiar with him because I think I got named in a video once when I worked at IGN. He made a video about IGN reviews, and I think I may have been named in it. That's how I found out about him. But he does make some funny stuff and some very critical stuff. But he published Animal Well, so it is the first video game published by a dude who has otherwise just been a YouTuber who really likes video games. And my stance is that's fucking cool. There's so many rules applied to people all the time about what they can and can't do based on what they have and have not done, I know when I started working in dev, everyone was like, well, you can't keep making YouTube videos, not from some internal company rule, but because people were like, you're a game developer now, you can't do that. And I was like, watch me.
You were like, yeah, I can do one a month. That's how many I can do.
Unless there's a pandemic, in which one a week.
Oh.
But I don't know. I respect that he pulled it off because I also don't know much about Animal Well, but I know that people really, really, really like it. Everyone I've seen talk about it has been very positive about it.
It's okay to be a tastemaker. I think that's something... I mean, that definitely exists, in the world of music, right, Austin? There are particular producers in, in pop music, for example, who are your only job is to have exquisite taste, right? There are people like that, and they've done well out of that, right?
It's an interesting...
Being hit makers.
Wait, what is that as a job?
Well...
What's the guy with the big beard with the dodgy politics called?
Rick Rubin? Does he have dodgy politics? I don't know anything about his politics, but he's...
Rich dudes.
There are guys in the music industry who you bring into the recording studio just to be like, yeah, I like that. That's good.
But then as they leave and they go, no abortions. It's just That's the
I don't know this guy's politics. I just remember he had bad politics. I feel bad.
I don't know much about him other than his pedigree as a producer. And I saw an interview with him not long ago where he was talking about how someone was interviewing him and asking all these questions like, what instruments do you play? Are you, and he's like, nothing really. And they said, what are you an engineer? Could you operate a console in a recording studio? And he was like, nope.
wow.
And he, I think he's a bit unusual amongst producers in that way, but his talent as a producer is quite unquestioned. I mean, he's one of the greats of all time, and there are other producers where you would have I think it's fair to call someone like Trent Reznor equal parts, front man of the band, but also significant producer. Because of just their eye in the sky view on the overall sound being sculpted. So to answer your question,
excellent taste in franchises as well, Trent Reznor.
Yeah, you got an opinion. You got an opinion on that one.
Very positive.
I love Trent Reznor. I think he's great.
All love Trent Reznor.
Genuinely, I remember fighting. So yeah, sorry, Trent Reznor. Yeah, Nine Inch Nails are doing the Neutron. I found out about that a little while ago, and it was the hardest secret I've ever had to keep. It was amazing. I was so excited.
It is a very cool announcement.
I'm so into them. Anyway, but yeah, no, I think that's the
in this context.
I think that's part of any leadership role is being able to pick. Like, that's what direction is on some level. Like, we all muck in and do stuff, and I think there's gatekeeping around. Well, you're a game director who can actually code. That's always been a big one in the games industry. It's like, if you're a game director with a background in like one of the real game jobs, quote unquote, of like programming or maybe game design or art, like those people, there's always been a bit of gatekeeping in that area. But ultimately, once you are a game director, you're not actually making stuff a lot of the time. You are just, I think,
telling
the
other
chair
people
should be
how to
red
make
or
the
blue.
things. Yeah.
Well, like, you are the
where
decision maker ultimately, rather than an actual doer of work a lot of the time.
There's a lot of interesting kind of threads to pull at there, because, for example, I know how to reasonably well mix my own music. And it's one of those things that you do in part along the way while you're doing it. It's not just a pile of ingredients that are not all balanced. Like, you're doing it as you go, but then there is always this process at the end where you then try to step back and go, okay, what really counts here? How do I make sure it really is coming through, et cetera, et cetera. But despite the fact that I can do it, there's nothing better than hiring a mixer who's going to come in with a clean slate and go, that thing at 27 seconds really caught my ear and is really interesting. And I'd really love to make sure that it's unmissable in the final mix. And I, as the composer, have a blind spot because I'm going, well, okay, I'm glad you like it, but that actually isn't what I would have pegged as the most important thing in that moment, that sort of thing. But yet, who am I trying to reach? Am I trying to solely appeal to myself, or do I want to connect with people? I've always firmly fallen on the latter side of that. Like, I'm not, to me, music is not made to entertain myself, because how could I'm too close to it. It's not, to me, it's not possible to listen to it the way a fresh audience member would, because it is for the audience. And an external point of view, hold that thought, an external point of view, like a mixer, coming in and improving it and seeing it for its highest potential is actually really valuable. So for me, that collaborator part of the process is huge. So now that you have your collaborator ready to assist you in your comment, Alana.
Banjo, any thoughts? If
exactly.
You are not making music for yourself, how do you dictate the audience? Like, don't you sort of have to, because the audience is so broad and unknowable in a lot of ways? Like, does it not have to be like if I take YouTube videos, for example, I make YouTube videos obviously with the intention of informing people a lot of the time, of entertaining people, but really I'm making stuff that I would want to watch. Like, that's the rule, is the way I edit it.
It's still an application of taste, even if you're thinking about the audience, right? Like, I do it slightly in the middle. I will try and make a game specifically, like, I make my game specifically, like, with a person in mind, right? Like, I'm thinking of a specific kind of person or specific taste.
Yeah.
Say again, sorry.
That's how I write most of the
That's how you
time. Is like
like you're telling a story to a friend,
Yeah.
or like working on franchise stuff. Like I'm thinking of like what would a fan of this franchise want or like you are. But even that is still a
The
filtration
audience is just
process.
so
That's still your
unknowable
applying taste.
in a lot of ways. So my
But
question is,
you're making guesses.
yeah, I guess. I
Making
feel
guesses
like
of what you think they would like.
I mean, as long as it's slightly narrowed down. I think my thought is like if
Yeah.
you make something for the audience, I feel like that's
The
an
peop-
easy way to fall in the trap of making something for no one because the audience is
that's
so big.
to be clear, that is not quite what I mean.
I wouldn't
it sounds
assume
like
it was
that's
what
what
you
I'm
mean
saying.
because you're very good at what you do. But you know,
Well,
what do you
but
mean?
whether I'm good or not, I do think I am. I do think that I hope at least that my work has a point of view. It's not bland and
Right.
generic.
Sure.
And so it's not that I'm suggesting that that taste or individuality is somehow secondary to just whatever the audience wants in some very kind of mindless way. It's not that at all. It's that I am applying my taste and my craft at what I do with the sole goal that it connect with someone. In other words, I will never cry from my own music. It's like I can't. It's like you can't tickle yourself. You know what I mean? Like it's just one of those things that I will never be moved by my own work. I know some people that are like that. They're like, wow, this piece really brings a tear to my eye. Talking about something they made. That's like alien to me. That's as baffling as if you.
I totally laugh at my own jokes. I 100% read
I'll
my
do
own
that
scripts
too.
back and go, "That's funny." You do that.
Yeah, but
well,
I wouldn't cry. I mean, I recently
You wouldn't
worked on
cry.
a horror thing, and watching it back, I was like, this isn't scary. But that's because I was there making it the whole time, I think, and so I had to ask other people and be like,
Yeah.
Scary?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Because I
It's-
just can't see
I
that
still
way.
That's
think,
what I
though,
mean.
like-
It's not like you can sample the whole of humanity and go, okay, this is working. So that's where you have trusted collaborators
Yeah.
who can help you see it. And then on some level, you still never know. You put a thing out. You know, I've listened to things that I thought were amazing, like from other, like I come across some random piece of music, I think it's amazing, but for whatever reason, it doesn't move the needle with most people. And then there's plenty of things that people worship that I go, doesn't really do much for me. So like I accept that tastes are impossible to fully just anticipate, but that's because
You have to have a point of view, right? You have to have like an
Yeah.
intent. Like it's
For
it's
sure.
like buying a birthday present for someone. Like you are making a decision. You might be trying to serve someone else, but you're still applying your own taste and your own thought. It's
I
what
think that's the only
we always
thing-
with my.
Sorry,
go on.
no, it's okay. I'll remember.
Well, I was going to say, I probably said this on the show before, but it's like my mantra with playtesting is I don't playtest to find out what we should be doing. I playtest to find out if what we're doing is achieving what we want. Like if we are successfully doing what we're trying to do. You know, I'm not playtesting to find out like should this game have this mechanic or would it be better if it was this. I'm playtesting to go, do people understand what we're fucking going for? Are people connecting at the moments we want them to? We had an experience with a recent playtest where you know, we with some story stuff, even it's very vague with some story stuff, we had a player who came out of the playtest and was like, I'm so annoyed, I don't know this and this about the story, I don't know who this character is, I don't know. And the hilarious thing was the next story moment that would have hit straight after the playtest basically answered every single one of their questions. So to me, that's a successful playtest because like that need was ready and we would deliver that in the full game. So stuff like that where you're just trying to check in on whether I'm building the right. I'm not rewriting the story because of a playtest, but I am definitely like paying attention to like are the things I'm doing clicking at the right moments in order to kind of pull those levers. It's still a very intentional choice on my part. I'm leading the dance, but I want to see if I'm tripping over their toes.
You're not letting the
what I mean?
play
I'm trying to
tester take over direction. You are still
exactly
directing.
It's a test for how well we are delivering what we're trying to deliver, and I think that's true of when you buy someone a birthday present. You're making a choice about what you think they would like, and you're going to find out very soon if they did or they didn't, right? But you're not giving up creative decision making. You're still making a decision, even if you are aiming at an audience. I think it's fine to make stuff for yourself. There's that quote that did the rounds recently from Pete Docter asking Miyazaki about like how do you create games for the audience, and Miyazaki's answer being, I don't make games for the audience. Make movies for the audience. I make movies for myself. I think that's fine.
I assumed you
and
were
I think
talking about From
intentionality.
Miyazaki. Because you said games.
No, Ghibli.
Let's
I
say
saw
it
that-
was. Let's
I
say
saw
it was.
that-
Yeah,
Ghibli.
George R.R. Martin walks in
Yeah.
and he says, "No, I do think that matters. Like, I think it almost to an extent doesn't matter who you're making it for, as long as you're making it for someone.
I agree. As long
and
as
I think
there's
that's how you avoid
a
the-
target.
Yeah,
Beyond just you.
like I definitely like with Thomas Was Alone. I made that to make Kerry smile. My fiance
So
smile.
cute.
Like that was. I just wanted to like, and it ends with for Kerry like, and turns out people in the world had the same taste as she did, and I don't think
And
she
they
did
all
like
love
it
Kerry.
as much as I hoped. Everyone loves
All
Kerry.
engaged to Carrie now, actually. So huge
Yeah.
success for
Yeah.
Carrie.
Kind of got out of control for you there. Sorry. Yeah, I don't disagree from a high altitude vantage point with any of that. What I was gonna add was that I think because craft, not everyone is equally good at the craft, but there are tons of great, masters of their craft, and it's also the most learnable aspect of any of this, of art, the creative work. Learning technique is the thing that is most transmittable, and therefore the only real metric that separates people, and which folks like us might go, oh, this person's good at it, but this person's great at it, is their taste. It's because the output is simply their taste applied to their craft. Now, yeah, some people have immensely high levels of craft, but there's lots of people with immensely high levels of craft that are at minimum our taste doesn't align with theirs, or maybe they just have kind of half-baked taste. Whichever of those is the more accurate statement, and maybe both or maybe neither. But the point is, that seems to be like, I remember once there's a composer who I met almost 20 years ago named Jeff Toyne, who incidentally is up for his first Emmy nomination this year for that Palm Royale. There was that, I think it's Netflix. It seemed like it was sort of their answer to White Lotus. He wrote this awesome, like,
I remember seeing that. Yeah,
it's got like Kristen Wiig and a fairly stacked cast. His score is so glorious. The main title is like this super old fashioned Mancini kind of jazz orchestra thing, and it was just delightful. And anyway, he was teaching at USC when I was a student there 20 years ago. He was teaching a music technology class or something, and I remember he said something that has stuck with me for literally 20 years. That's basically this conversation where he goes, because all of us can get good at it, all that you are is your taste. That is why you will be hired. That's why people, if anyone likes you, John Williams is not the only person by any kind of stretch of the imagination that can write big, grand, glorious, old-fashioned orchestral music and with great melodies and all that. He's especially good at it, but he is not the only one that can do it. But his particular taste is so aligned with Steven Spielberg that it becomes unquestionable for Spielberg to want to work with him again and again and again and again. That subjectivity that we cultivate in ourselves is what makes us us. So that's where
the creative
I
thing.
love that. That definitely works.
Yeah, but it makes me wonder where our taste comes from. Like, is that just like
the
you
amalgam
contain
of our
multitudes?
entire
Yeah,
life,
right?
Yeah,
Like just everything you've ever seen and everything you've ever heard just becomes.
This is why my
whatever your
number
taste
one
is.
advice. Yes, exactly. It's all your heartbreak, all your wins, all the times you fucked up, all of it. To me, when I speak to classes of young composers, and we usually kind of end with sort of high level, what sort of advice? My number one is always don't, like, as hard as I advocate people working, and like as much as I spend so much time at my desk, trying to be better at this, if you do only that, you will at the end, at some point, start to become very self-referential, because the ones that are great, you have nothing to say. You have to go live a life worth commenting on through your work. That if you don't do that, then at best you are your technique.
I mean,
You're
definitely
not,
a
there is
huge
no
thing
taste,
for
there
writing
is no
as well.
story.
If you've been a writer your whole life and you've only been a writer and you've never worked another job, you don't have shit to say about most people's lives.
And also just like, honestly, media consumption in general, like that's the advice I always give people is please fucking watch something else other than like Star Wars. Like go and
watch things you don't like.
The utter cheat code for like creative direction of not referencing the same 10 nerd movies that everyone else is referencing. Like, you don't even have to go and live a rich life. Just try watching like a rom-com every now and again. You know what I mean? Just go and like look at something that wouldn't necessarily be
Yeah.
in that roster of the 10 things that all video games are ripping off.
Yeah.
Just having that kind of remixy, informed taste, basically taste that goes beyond what your peers have, is such an edge.
Because it's not really set in stone, is it? Like, I feel like our taste changes progressively. Like,
Oh, for sure.
Rahul and I have uncannily similar taste in movies, in that sometimes we have to try to make sure we aren't influencing each other in a movie theater. So we'll try not to give the other one any inclination of how we're feeling, because we tend to feel so identical about movies. Like, the only moment when I realized that he was enjoying Godzilla -1 as much as I was when I looked over and he was crying and I was about to start crying. And I was like, okay, great, we're on the same page with this one. The movie's so fucking good. But just to insert a little parenthetical here, why are you avoiding influencing each other in a theater? Like, what is the damage done in, like, feeding off each other's mutual... that we just parrot each other's opinions because we're so close on opinion where film is concerned. And we sometimes have friends who, like, really strongly disagree and we're, like, the outliers. And we go, did we just accidentally influence each other? But again, we've, like, put in measures.
It isn't like the premise of a relationship.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. Like I would argue that we've spent so much time, especially because of pandemic stuff, consuming so much media together that we probably actually just do have extremely aligned tastes. Yeah, and I mean, so much of our relationship is watching things and talking about things, right? So it's like it happened that we just have the same taste. So do you not
have...
But that seems
just
like,
to really dig in on the relationship here, because this is fascinating to me.
Play, watch, listen, add it again.
Do you have, so like with me and Kerry, we have like Mike shows, Kerry shows, and Kerry and Mike shows. Do you not have that? Do you basically share everything together?
I don't watch a lot of TV, so we have Rahul shows.
They mainly watch Bly Manor and Midnight Mass.
The things I am legally obligated to watch. I don't really watch TV, so Rahul has Rahul shows. But there are, like, we watch through the whole Sopranos. We next want to watch Succession. So there are things that, like, if I really want to watch a TV show, I will have him watch it with me, and he's pretty much down to watch anything. But, like... Yeah, there are no Alana shows because I just would never do that. I don't have time.
That's fascinating. No, we have, like, entire, like... me and Kerry have, like, we have convergence on some stuff, but we consume a lot of separate media as well. Where are you two at, Austin? Are you closer to me or Alana?
You know, I think our model resembles yours and Kerry's in that there are things that she'll pitch that I wouldn't have thought to watch, or that I wouldn't necessarily been my thing, or it's something that like we rewatched Princess Mononoke the other night, which I've seen before, and I have, you know, undying, just endless admiration for Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki and Joe Hisaishi, and but for whatever reason, those aren't my go-to a lot. It's one of those, but for her, you know, it's sort of anime in general, but particularly the Miyazaki films are just like, it's just comfort food. It's just endless comfort. Yeah, there you go.
I love the use of the word pitch, because I imagine like a whiteboard.
Hear me
out.
Oh yeah.
She'll pitch a movie, and it's like, but it's okay.
Yeah, no, it happens all the time. You know. I mean,
White
perfect example is because
it's the alien dollar sign thing.
Because she's you know, a visual artist who doesn't like, she puts stuff on while she works, and you know, so she's watched like the entirety of Friends like 1,000 times, because she'll just, you know, she can get through like 40 episodes a day because it just kind of ambiently runs while she's doing stuff, you know. And so she watches quite a lot as a result, and every now and again she'll go, you know, everyone's talked about this one forever, and I should shake it up so I'm not just watching Friends over and over again. And so like a perfect example was that Sex and the City came across her docket, and she was like, you know what? This is going to be one that I pitch for us together. I would never have watched that show. And we've almost finished the entire series now. And I'm like, you know, there is so much going on here that is...
You're such a Samantha.
Oh my God. I think that I like probably a lot of people saw that from the outside and was like, that show is definitely X, and it is, but it's also a lot more. And I was also astounded. I kept pausing it and going, look at the way they've shot this. This is hilariously cinematic.
Well, that was
hiding
in that
plain
first like
sight.
HBO high caliber wave, right? That was one of those first. Yeah.
There are so many moments where it's very obvious they take the script and they block out the shots in very clever ways where I was going, they really took this seriously as film. This isn't just people in a room talking about relationships. Also, I must say, again, I never knew anything about the show until the last few months, other than that it was beloved, at least by a certain, like the caricature of a certain kind of person. Oh, it's a show for that sort of person. And I was sitting there going, wow, there's real genuine heart in this. They actually grapple with real like relationship quandaries. But also they shot this thing just fucking right in the middle of Manhattan. It's insane how many shots there are people in the background just clearly watching the cameras where I go, they just literally went into Fifth Avenue and filmed this show. And I did not remember that. I did not realize. And just the kind of the moxie of filming a show that way is insane. Or it just seems like, my God, the budget on this really must have been considerable, because that's not a small thing to do. Oh yeah,
it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so I guess
and
it
Mike's
was like
right.
It
It
was
was
that kind of first wave, right?
Yeah.
It was like in that Sopranos
I
era.
watched it, but I was really young, so I barely remember it. Like, I remember bits and pieces of that show, but not very much. I was probably like a 14-year-old girl or something. I distinctly remember an episode where Samantha covers herself naked in sushi and is upset.
There's always shenanigans like that.
There are shenanigans, yeah.
But like then the show goes into
I thought there was like a really interesting Judaism arc. It's a whole thing.
We just got through that. That's a whole there's a whole thing about like when it was implicitly built into a relationship that you would want to have kids, and then life maybe says otherwise. Like, where does that leave you? That's a really fucking tough existential question that a lot of people deal with. And to put that kind of thing in a comedy and not try to make it funny. They just put it in there as like, this is what she's dealing with. And it's one of those where, it has plenty of episodes where it's like, it's painfully cheesy, but so all shows that run long enough do. But I found myself impressed. But that's a perfect example of one that I would never in a million years have watched this show if she hadn't pitched it. It's not even the kind of show I would really think of her as typically pitching.
What made you say yes to watching it with her rather than having it be like another one of her background shows?
Because generally, if she says, "Hey, I think we should watch this," I go, "Okay." She doesn't use that very frequently as like we just watched one the other day that's this Netflix Paul Rudd show called Living with Yourself. That was just a single season.
Is that the one where he's like got like a clone? Is it?
Yeah, he gets sort of unintentionally cloned.
I saw like a couple of those, I think. Yeah.
Neither of us loved it. It really felt like the premise was way better than the execution. That
was our thing. Yeah.
Because Paul Rudd is, he's just a gift, and it kind of felt like, if it were anybody else, it would have been really quite forgettable. Because he does such a great job with pretty much everything he's given. At least in my opinion, I think he's one of those just evergreen,
absolutely so
contributors. And and so it's one of those where it felt like they couldn't quite decide where to go with it, and because the bones of it are really interesting. But that was an example where she started watching it because she's just always exploring new stuff while she paints and creates. And watched an episode and said, actually, you know what? I'm going to stop here. I'm going to pitch this as one for us. Now, on the flip side, I have, after much persuasion, convinced her to watch The Expanse, which for me is just the greatest thing ever made. I am so obsessed. I just recently got my you can barely see it, but I have a nice Rocinante model there amongst a few other similar things.
Nice.
It's, to me, that show is just, and she tried it with me maybe a year and a half ago and bounced off it, and then I just kind of kept talking about it again and again. She finally was like, okay, let's try again. And the other night we're about halfway through it, and the other night she was like, I gotta say, it's getting pretty interesting.
So I can, like, genuinely, The Expanse, I'd not seen it until about a year ago. That first episode bounces you off. It took me a couple of watches of the first episode to then roll into the rest of it. Once you're into it, you're into it. But like, it's not a super welcoming show. It doesn't really get under your skin straight away.
Well, to me, it has that same quality that Game of Thrones has, where
I was going to say it's similar to Game of Thrones. Yeah.
It's like we're going to have so many balls in the air. There's no way to onboard you other than just brute force saying, look, here's 40 characters and a lot of different kind of like political.
Sorry, I know very little about it. It's a sci-fi show, akin to a Star Trek. Or more like a Game of Thrones in space, or more like Star Wars.
It's way more Game of Thrones in space than Star Trek or Star Wars.
Okay.
It's kind of colonial marines of Thrones. It's kind of colonial marines makes it too specific. It has that kind of the alien thing of like, it feels realistic to what like our culture would evolve into if space travel existed. Shit. It's got that energy. It's not focused on that side of it as much, but it's got that kind of or like Firefly back in the day, like Firefly. That sense of like, but less. But what if Firefly? But people are not constantly joking.
Yeah, and also Firefly
a bit of realism to it.
Yeah, Firefly has like this is way closer to hard sci-fi, where it's quite realistic. It everything feels pretty believable.
So, yeah.
Firefly embraces a certain amount of Star Wars-esque, like,
totally. Yeah.
There's probably gravity on spaceships because that would be cool, and like, there's engines.
Yeah, the Expanse is aggressively realistic in that sense. Yeah,
like
it's really good. It
informs the story. The realism of it informs the actual characters.
This is
in the
not
story.
the show that has a video game tie-in, is it?
They did
did have a Telltale game, yeah.
Oh well, I'm thinking of there was a sci-fi TV show that had a game come out at the same time, and the things that happened in the game.
Defiance.
There you go.
You're talking about Defiance, which I pitched for Defiance. I pitched to make that Defiance game way back when.
Really?
Obviously, didn't get it. Yeah, well, I was on a team that did. The Expanse. You know what it does? You know what I think is the unique kind of special source of the Expanse, and why you should watch it, Alana?
You're the reason I watched Shogun, and that ruled.
That was. Oh, was I? Oh, awesome! Yeah, Shogun fucking is amazing. The brilliance of the Expanse, I don't know if you agree with this, Austin. It does the hard sci-fi, which Austin's talking about, and it does it very well. But it's really clever in that it also is not afraid to do genre stuff. It does sci-fi genre stuff, but turns it into hard sci-fi. So you've got the film noir detective, the evil empire, the Han Solo type. You've got all of these archetypes that are part of sci-fi pulpy fiction, but then you crash those directly into no, but what if gravity and the speed of light were problems?
That's fun.
And how do you kind of build that? It's really good. It's well.
I largely agree with that. I do think that it's. I do think that it's. It doesn't feel like it's. I would say it invokes the kind of genres that you're describing with a very light touch. Like, for example, the whole Miller arc doesn't feel like it's trying to be overly film noir. It's more just like gentle little uses of some of the familiar kind of tropes and images, like his hat, that kind of stuff. But that's it's gentle about that stuff. Because, at heart, it's what I love about it is that despite the fact that we've focused so much on the sci-fi, the hard sci-fi aspect to it, the characters are what keep you in. That's the same reason. That's what makes most things great. It has a wonderfully intriguing political story, but all the characters are interesting independently. Even though, all the sort of so-called bad guy characters are interesting and not without their sympathetic perspectives. There's no like cartoon villains, and the heroes. In this way, you could liken it to Firefly. The heroes are morally ambiguous at best, and constantly having to face tough decisions where you're like, well, there's clearly no good outcome here. So what's the least bad one, And also they do a really good job at bringing together a core cast of characters that have conflicting points of view where they have to work through their shit to be able to coexist, which to me is like one of those. The world needs a lot of this
very
right
Bethesda
now.
RPG.
It's really, really. The other thing
Says it was canceled after 3 seasons, and then brought back again?
Amazon picked it up.
Then brought back by Amazon Prime. Yeah.
Why was it
Yeah,
canceled?
I think you might really like it. I think you might really like it. It's one of those kind of. It's a bit of a slow burn. Like I said, the first episode is not hyper
whole first
welcoming.
season, you don't even know what The Expanse is about until the end of the first season. Now,
that's true.
Like, here's the thing. When people go, oh, you have to play, Death Stranding for 20 hours before it gets its hooks in you. To me, that's just like, that's a good way to tell me I don't need to bother with that game. Yeah. The reason why The Expanse is not that is, I would say on a plot level, it doesn't play its cards until really the end of the first season. But I am engaged immediately, and I'm like, where is this going? Oh yeah, not at all. Like, even the first episode.
This is also the problem with like House of the Dragon, which has like a first season which is genuinely a slog, and then that second season is like
really? Because doesn't the first season have like 1,000 time jumps? How is it? How do you?
That's the problem with it. You don't have time to like emotionally care. It feels like watching a history lesson. It feels like because you are literally over that first season. I think it takes place over like 15 years or something.
It's
so you just
something like
that. It's just so it's a slog. And then like I said, the second season, it's like, oh, I'm watching good Game of Thrones. I'm watching like
people seem to be loving
that era of Game of Thrones.
I haven't.
The second season genuinely is really solid.
Where do you guys land on
ended weirdly, but great.
Wait. To answer your question about why it was canceled.
Yeah, sorry.
I think that the show. It's definitely not a quality reason, because the show has that same Firefly phenomenon of those that know it tend to be obsessed with it. It's just the problem is we're a small group of people.
Yeah, you're the only person you've spoken about it on the show before. The only person I've really heard talk about it at length ever. I don't feel like I really see it get mentioned.
I watched it because I think you mentioned it on an episode. That's when I only watched it about a year ago. So I think
I'm on my third pass through it, and I started reading the books because I was just like, I need more. And also, as a side note, it is a masterclass in smart choices when adapting from source material, because the book is super interesting and so different from the show. It's been blowing my mind. I'm most of the way done with the first book. I'm almost to the end, and like there are whole storylines in the show that are, at least as of now, not in the book as far as I've made it. And I don't know if they will show up in a different form later. Like, to give an example, one of the characters they introduced straight out of the gate of the show is the one of the senior level political people from Earth named Christian Avasarala, who I can never remember how to pronounce the name of the actress, but it's the throaty chain smoker actress who has the most amazing voice of all time.
Yeah, she got such a
who's
cool
played
voice.
that role in every single.
Played that role in everything.
Expanse.
Yeah.
The Expanse is one of those, by the way, Alana, where you'll watch The Expanse, you'll be like, oh, that was the big break of this actor. Oh, that was the big break of this actor. It's one of those shows as well.
Yeah. So her character is hugely important to the story. And one of the things that she exemplifies that I think is a general truism about the show is that conflict and plot tension is never derived from people behaving stupidly. It's from smart people being pitted against other smart people. And so it's got that, like Andor had that same quality as well. There's no just dumb contrivances where people just do things where you go, no one would fucking do that. That's just such a crutch and such a hallmark of bad writing. The Expanse is people all on every side of the table trying to outsmart each other. It was the same thing that made Game of Thrones so great, at least in the early seasons.
Literally
where you're
the
like,
Game of the Thrones.
Yeah, no one was stupid. Everyone, or maybe people would make a mistake, but not because they're just bumbling idiots. And The Expanse is loaded with that. But Avasarala, as an example, I'm almost to the end of the book. Her character has not existed yet in the book. And like it has never left the perspective of the characters of Holden or Miller. It's a design conceit to the way the book is written. But I thought they would at least make reference to like watching her on the news, because she's this top level government. She's the equivalent of like the Secretary of State at the start, and like very high level, kind of third in the chain of command for the UN, which is the Earth government, and she doesn't exist. And I'm like, but what it does is they let you do the world building that the book does kind of at the edge through a person. And I'm like, that's really smart television.
Which TV
adaptation.
you have to do. TV you have to pull it to a performance and a character.
Oh, it's amazing.
Absolutely.
And then it lets you learn about characters through action instead of inner monologuing that a book can do compellingly.
Yeah.
And it's just, like I said, because I love them both, I really think that the book, it's clear that they had great source material, but for whatever reason, it never found an audience. It's clear that the show was punching way above its weight, because I don't think it was that high budget, but they leverage it incredibly. And then, the word that I heard, I don't actually know if this is true, but apparently after it was canceled, Jeff Bezos was just quite literally personally such a fan that he refused to let it go off the air saw to it that Amazon pick it up and continue it for 3 more seasons.
It's one good act.
It's pretty.
I forgive the guy.
I mean, look, I think that's too harsh to say. Amazon.
No, you're right. Yeah,
there's plenty you can criticize about Amazon, but Amazon has done a lot of good for the world, I think.
I spend a lot of money on Amazon. I'm not knocking it.
Yeah, like it's pretty. The consumer convenience of Amazon is mind-boggling, and while
changed all of our lives, really.
I leave a lot of space for how they achieve that being questionable. I would not be one to I'm not some sycophant at all.
Well, it's not even really questionable. The reports are pretty bad.
Yeah, no, pretty awful. I don't think the ends justify the means, but I refuse to say his one good act is bringing back the Expanse.
Getting me books.
It's probably
I retract my joke. I retract it.
It's his single best act, though, because the Expanse is fucking amazing.
But yeah, no, it appears that it is true. It's his favorite TV show. I mean, this all the reports on this are anecdotal, but there are several of them. Like, there's a Los Angeles Times one. Yeah, I don't know.
The thing is, the brilliance of The Expanse as well, like on a production level, is a very cheap show to produce, or was a very cheap, for a sci-fi show, is very cheaply done, because it coincides, I was fascinated by, basically it coincides with like cheap, like touch screens and like iPads, and high quality screens that look good on camera, because a lot, when you're watching it, when you do inevitably watch it, because you will, because it's really good, you should watch it. Like, there's just a lot of very clever usage of that exact era of technology to make essentially like spaceships out of iPads, and how they use that tech. And there's a lot of like behind the scenes things of them like buying like microphone mounts and just buying 20 of them and building like these labyrinthine. You will,
cool.
As someone who knows your tech and your equipment side of things, you're going to watch The Expanse and go, oh, they went on Amazon and bought some fucking screen mounts, and now they've got a spaceship.
That's cool.
It's it's very frugally made TV
I love
show.
That stuff.
You can tell that they pulled off every trick, but the production design and props and costumes people were just absolutely fucking on it. I just Googled.
I'm not saying it looks cheap. I'm saying it looks impressively expensive. Yeah,
no, exactly. No, I think it wasn't high budget, but because it was sort of not a like the books, I assume, were not the biggest thing ever. So it was like just enough to get made into a TV show with a respectable budget, but they had to keep things under control. I just Googled, it's the first hit, so, this is obviously not, I don't know if this is accurate, but it says average cost per episode of the first season was $3.4 million, and then it scaled down to below $3 per episode after that. And that's like, it does not look that low. It does not look like a show.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah. It's, because there's a ton of sets, they're constantly going to new locations.
Whereas, like, I feel like some of the recent Star Wars does look very cheap, and some of those episodes probably cost more than that, like some of the volume stuff.
Oh, like,
that way.
What was the Acolyte per episode? Wasn't
a
it
lot.
like 22 million?
Per episode?
It does not look 10 times better than The Expanse. At best, they look on par.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, that's a very crude, like, there's a lot of, God knows what all, like, it's a very clumsy way to kind of, you can't quite apples to apples show, so it's not the fairest in that way, but it is at least a shared piece of data, and they are both hour-long format and blah, blah, blah. But it's, anyway, I just can't say enough good things about The Expanse. This is now an Expanse podcast, by the way.
Question was, I mean, we mentioned Star Wars. We got it all out. How do you guys feel about Battlestar Galactica? Where do you land on that show?
I loved it. I've watched it.
I loved it at the time. I loved it when I've gone back to it. It's aged. Oh, has it? Because I've been thinking about going back.
Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thinking about going back. Because I've been thin
in only to the extent that it kind of inspired a generation of television, and now when you go back to it, it's like, oh, okay, it's I've seen similar arguments made about Thomas Was Alone as a platforming game. Like, for sure, like this was big when it came out and it was important, but like it's been superseded. And in a world where Celeste exists, Thomas Was Alone now shows its age, right? So like I think it's similar with Battlestar. Like it feels like a very important step in TV production history, and honestly was kind of doing a lot of the tricks we're talking about with the Expanse in terms of like doing stuff on a budget and
oh yeah,
good
that show
character-driven stuff
way above its weight.
And it has, especially those first seasons, have all of that energy of like the dude who had been stuck on Star Trek for a while and was really aching to do something different. It has that kind of passion built for it. It's Ronald D. Moore, right? That was his big thing. But yeah, when you watch it, when I watched it again, I was like, this is great. But The Expanse and Game of Thrones and other genre TV shows have kind of surpassed it. But it's still worth going back to. It's interesting. I think it has, your mileage may vary. Yeah.
I actually don't disagree with any of that. I do, when I've watched bits and pieces of it, it does feel a little bit like you're watching an important. It's like if you watch The Wizard of Oz in the tornado scene, you're not sitting there with the same reaction as someone then, but you can actively be in awe of it for what it did to move the needle. You know what I mean? So you kind of watch it through this meta lens.
I feel a little bit that way about. I love that movie, but I feel like part of the appreciation for that movie when you watch it now, it's not that I think it's aged badly, it's aged quite well. It's that you feel like you're watching other people see this shit for the first time. Like you're watching, the bits in 2001 where they're like walking and it looks like they're upside down. That's the first time something like that had really been seen in film, and you feel that when you're watching it, which adds a bunch of weight to it. And they really, 2001 really stays on those shots for a long time, which we wouldn't do now, because that's not that unusual that someone's upside down on a spaceship or whatever. But Kubrick being the first person to really do it was like, stay on that. They're going to lose their minds. So you're watching.
And we always forget as well that there wasn't actual photography of spaceships in space at that point either, right? So a lot of that stuff is speculative in a way that we are just so used to that imagery now, both in fiction and real. There were photographs from space, obviously, but not photographs of that kind of manned space flight in that kind of context.
I think I've said this a million times on the show, but the first time that I watched Alien was, I may have seen it when I was a kid because my dad loves Alien and Predator, but quite a bit later in life, and I thought that it looked generic, and then I realized the reason it looked generic is because everything copied it.
Yeah.
But I was like, this just looks like every other sci-fi movie I've ever seen. What's the big deal? And then I was like, oh, this is why they all look that way. It's the total opposite of what I expected.
It's the Rosetta Stone of genre.
I think that's a really good assessment. Like that, what you just said about Alien is a good Battlestar Galactica comment.
Yeah.
Like that show influenced so much that came after.
When did Battlestar actually come out? When was season 1 of Battlestar Galactica?
Earlier than we think.
2002, wasn't it?
Right.
Something like that?
Because it was commenting on 9/11, so it was definitely early 2000s. Right?
2004.
2004.
Yeah.
Which, I know that
it's
despite the
first aired as
bits
a
of aging.
Yeah,
it was a miniseries of
on Sci-Fi Channel as well, which again, that's what's fascinating about the history of these channels, which makes sense. But HBO was a movie channel which started doing exploitation kind of sex TV shows basically in order to get interest, and then someone was like, we could put some emotional depth into the show with the tits in it, and that's where you get Sex and the City and Sopranos, and you kind of build from there. There's this whole generation of HBO shows that everyone's forgotten. Well, literally, what's the one? There was one David Duchovny hosting it was erotic thriller show.
They say the minute that you can get porn to work on a platform, it will be successful.
Yeah.
VHS.
But then Sci-Fi Channel was reruns,
iPhones.
and then Sci-Fi Channel went let's go and do a TV show.
It's like AMC with Breaking Bad and Mad Men, where AMC was literally a movie channel not making original content, and then just fucking announced themselves as, we make really high prestige amazing shit. I will
AMC
say
now. I actually don't Are they
have a
folded into one
famous
of the
slew.
streaming services? Like
They
is an
all
AMC
seem to
TV?
have their deals in various places.
Yeah, I don't know
but
where they are.
It's just Warrior. That's the only reason to watch AMC now.
There
Warrior.
is an AMC Plus,
Oh, is there?
Not
apparently,
surprising.
but yeah,
a lot
I guess
of those end up
AMC
showing up as add-ons, or you can get like Hulu and then get the AMC. You know, like I have Stars on my Hulu, for
Right,
example.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
tied in, that sort of thing. Anyway, I will say about Battlestar Galactica, and then I got to run. Is that despite my agreement with the kind of it's probably aged a bit but we can still look at it through this appreciation lens that you're describing. I still think it has one of the best pilots ever made by anyone ever.
Fact.
Like it is one of the single, like for all the, it's the opposite of the Expanse in that regard, where like you said, you can forgive someone bouncing off the pilot of the Expanse and just saying, please trust that this is worth it. Even though I hate when people say that to me.
Yeah.
But Battlestar Galactica is just like, let's show you how it's done. Of the series, not the miniseries. The miniseries is fine, but the show's pilot, it's, what is it called? Like 130 minutes or something like that. With like the interval of their jumps, and everyone's exhausted and taking like drugs in order to stay awake.
And also
like,
that it's set during a like historical celebration of the backstory, just so you can do all your exposition in a really clean. It's very clever.
Which, as we've established in these conversations, pilots are really hard. Like, there are a lot of great shows that don't have, even The Office. And people love the US Office. Pilot's not that great. Parks and Rec, similarly, like, not a great pilot. Like, pilots are really difficult to pull off. You know, the story about the Game of Thrones pilot was basically so bad that they had to reshoot almost the whole thing. Like, it was originally just
same with
awful.
The Sherlock TV show in the UK with Benedict Cumberbatch. Similar thing. That's fascinating. I remember watching that. It's on, I think, on the DVD for Sherlock.
I love a BTS of how shitty a pilot originally was.
They have the literal whole pilot.
Oh, you just watched the whole thing?
They have the whole pilot. You can watch the whole thing. I'm sure it'll be somewhere on the internet now. But like the pilot for Sherlock is fascinating because it's literally, you could side by side them and go, oh, that's why they made that tweak. And that's very cool. Educational watching that and seeing.
Gives you a lot of sympathy for the network model where they have to just build the plane mid-flight. It's not like a streamer show or an HBO kind of thing where you build the season as a unit. And so if you need to make major changes, you at least have some possibility. It's a very expensive and a horrible one, but if you really have to gut your pilot, you haven't unleashed the thing. But you know, the classic network model, because same thing, like Star Trek Next Generation, like that, the pilot introduces you to some very important things that they pay off all the way to the end at the series finale, but like it's pretty rough going when you watch it. Or like Firefly, famously, part of the reason the show failed was that the pilot tested that people thought it was so slow and boring that Fox aired it third, I think. They literally
out of order,
they changed the order, and so no one knew what the hell was going on because all the kind of world building and exposition that was a bit clumsily done. Buffy's another one. I'm a huge Buffy fan, and the whole first season is unwatchable compared to what it does later. You know, I mean, it's hard. It's really
it's hard to balance the story you're trying to tell with the urgency of how to introduce everybody. You know, like that's
and you don't know what you're doing yet.
No, and none of you
the actors
right?
know their characters.
Exactly.
The writer,
no one does. Director doesn't know how they
it's-
want to work on this particular format. Like this, you're watching people learning in real time. It's just that it's recorded, and it's like such a funny thing about any kind of professional creative field is that half the time you are just watching somebody trying, and you just get to see every time they fail because the job requires it to be published anyway.
Yeah,
it's such a weird, consistent thing.
It is weird.
Yeah. It's interesting how games frequently end up by necessity in an almost opposite position where there's a lot of games that start way stronger than they end because it's the part that's been, games are obviously not necessarily made in order per se, but just the number of people that I've talked to who sort of privately confess that the polish of the first third of their game is like 1,000% more than the end because they had more time to do it. They're able to go back to it and constantly improve things.
I love when you're playing a AAA game and you get to the E3 stage demo bit and you're like, wow, this is like...
But that's also by design, obviously, because most players won't get to the end, so the end doesn't have to be quite as polished, which is such, video games are dumb. That's my take.
Let's stop making
Video games are
That's the
stupid.
main
Let's make
takeaway.
Battlestar Galactica.
Let's just go watch The Expanse and not make stuff because it's not for ourselves; it's for the audience.
Yeah.
Oh,
let's
beautiful.
do it. Which related, I
Love
can
it.
say that I somehow am friends with Mary McDonnell, and obviously Michael Trucco, who I think you met, Austin.
Have
And they're
met
both
Michael
wonderful.
Trucco.
Pleased to announce that they are both really great people. I had such a wonderful conversation with Mary McDonnell, obviously both Battlestar Galactica actors. We sort of know Trisha Helfer as well, and they're all just really good people.
She's to me her dynamic with Adamo, is one of the things that I remember loving. Like when I think back on Battlestar, when
Totally.
she goes, there's like an episode where they have the first birth in the fleet in a while, and she goes to her little whiteboard and adds a number, and it's like so
that
emotional.
moment, man. Oh,
Yeah, where you're just
That
like,
hits
boy,
hard.
what an earned, cathartic
Yeah.
moment, you know. And she's such a big part of how that comes off, you know. She's
100%.
really,
Yeah.
she's great.
I
Yeah, it was really
think
cool
I
to
gotta
see her
rewatch
in.
that too. It's too much TV, too many video games. I just keep
much
reading
TV.
books at the moment. Like we Austin
Nerd!
go, and I get it.
Nerd.
Yeah, I've actually just started reading. Shut up! You were just ranting at me about
Literally
The
insane.
Expanse. Go fuck yourselves.
Insane.
I've been reading
It's
Lord
beautiful.
of the Flies for the first time.
It's very clear the only book that anyone on this show is allowed to read.
That's useful research for this. Oh, Oscar water. Lovely.
You got to Oscar.
Oscar water.
You gotta Oscar him. All right, thank you for watching, everybody. We will see you probably in a month, as we are employed devastatingly now. We're doing our best. This is a great frame to end on. That's it.
Well, yeah,
Bye.
we'll do some Gamescom discussion next time.
Yeah, maybe in a month.
Bye.
I'm a lot of Bye.